While you've been searching for meaning, meaning has been searching for you. Every repeated number, every name whispered twice by chance, every door that opens the moment you think of it, these aren't coincidences. They're signals from the deep architecture of reality, calling you to remember that nothing in your life is random. Hidden beneath ordinary events lies an ancient design, a living script that responds to your thoughts, emotions, and choices. The universe is not a machine, it's a mirror. And once you learn to read its reflections, you'll never look at chance the same way again. There are moments when the ordinary world seems to hesitate, as if reality itself is listening. You glance at the clock, 11:11. You hear the same name spoken twice in a single hour. A song from childhood begins to play just as the memory of it crosses your mind. For an instant, the boundaries between thought and event blur, and something vast peers back through the veil. Most people brush these moments away as random coincidence. But the ancients would have stopped, breathed, and whispered. A sign. To them, the universe was never silent. Every gust of wind, every echo of sound, every flicker of light was part of a grand conversation between the visible and the unseen. They called this conversation the music of the spheres, a harmony that connects all things through vibration and rhythm. What we call coincidence, they regarded as the faint melody of that cosmic music breaking through the noise of daily life. In the temples along the Nile and the deserts of Babylon, initiates were trained to listen to that music. They learned that the gods did not speak in human words, but in patterns, numbers, images, and perfectly timed encounters that reflected the inner state of the soul. When a student was ready to receive new understanding, life itself rearranged to deliver it. The right teacher appeared, the right book fell open. A dream arrived with symbols precise enough to ignite recognition. Synchronicity, in its essence, is that same process of recognition. The moment consciousness realizes, it is in dialogue with the whole of existence. The modern mind, conditioned to believe in separation, calls these events accidents. Yet underneath every accident lies the architecture of meaning. A coincidence is simply the meeting point between an inner vibration and an outer expression, between what you are becoming and what the world reflects back to you. Imagine for a moment that reality is woven from luminous threads. Each thread carries the tone of a thought, an emotion, a choice. As you move through life, the threads you resonate with begin to glow brighter, tugging others into harmony with them. When two or more threads align perfectly in frequency, they cross, and at that intersection, a synchronicity is born. The crossing might appear as a meeting, a symbol, a sudden opportunity, but the deeper truth is that your consciousness called it into being. The ancient philosophers knew this well. As above, so below, as within, so without. Those 7 words were not just mystical poetry, they were instructions for perception. They meant that every event in the external world carries a reflection of the internal world. Change the vibration of the inner, and the outer begins to answer. Synchronicity, then, is the echo of transformation, the mirror responding to the movement of your own soul. To enter this understanding is to walk through a doorway. On one side lies a reality ruled by chance, on the other a reality infused with dialogue. When you step through, the mundane becomes mythic. A bird landing on a windowsill becomes a messenger. A delay on your path becomes an act of guidance. The universe ceases to be an indifferent stage and becomes a living teacher, precise in its timing and infinite in patience. The first lesson that every initiate received was simple: pay attention. Attention is the key that unlocks communication. The moment you begin to notice the small alignments, the repetition of a symbol, the recurrence of a number, the serendipity of an encounter, you start to re-enter the conversation that has always surrounded you. Awareness magnifies pattern. Pattern magnifies awareness. The two spiral together like twin currents of light. Consider the story told in The Mysteries of Eleusis. A traveler, weary and lost, prays for a sign. At that instant, a hawk descends and lands upon a stone carved with the emblem of the goddess he seeks. To the uninitiated, it is only a bird resting, To the one who prays, it is a response, a bridge between despair and faith. That recognition alters him. His path shifts. The outer event is small, but the inner movement is vast. Such is the power of synchronicity. It is not the event itself that changes you, but the meaning you awaken within it. Modern psychology echoes this truth. Carl Jung describes synchronicity as an acausal connecting principle, a meeting between inner psychic states and outer events that share meaning but not cause. He suggested that psyche and matter are not separate domains, but expressions of one underlying reality. When the psyche moves, matter answers not through mechanical cause, but through resonance. The mystics had already lived this truth for millennia. Jung merely gave it a new language. In every tradition, there are stories of the one who listens. The Oracle of Delphi sat above the chasm of the earth, inhaling vapors and translating patterns into prophecy. The druid watched the flight of birds. The monk heard wisdom in the ringing of a temple bell. These were not superstitions, but sophisticated methods of communication with the living field. Each culture developed its own alphabet of signs, its own way of decoding the feedback of reality. The question is not whether synchronicity exists, it is whether we are awake enough to perceive it. The signs are constant, but our perception flickers. When we are consumed by distraction, the dialogue grows faint. When we are centered, present, and receptive, the dialogue becomes unmistakable. The quality of our awareness determines the clarity of the code. To learn this language requires patience and humility. The ego loves to seize symbols for self-importance. This happened because I am special. Yet the deeper truth is quieter. This happened because I am connected. Synchronicity does not flatter, it teaches. Sometimes the signs confirm alignment. Sometimes they reveal imbalance. They are mirrors, not medals. The wise treat them as guidance rather than proof of destiny. Imagine a seeker sitting by a river at dawn. She is troubled by uncertainty, unsure whether to pursue a new path or remain where she is. As she breathes her question into the still air, a fish leaps, breaking the surface with a silver flash. The ripples reach the shore and disappear. In that instant, clarity arrives not because the fish caused it, but because the event mirrored her readiness to decide. The outer movement resonated with her inner one, and meaning bridged the gap. Every life, if examined with attention, reveals such bridges. They are the secret architecture of growth. We meet the right person precisely when our hearts can recognize them. We face obstacles that match the strength we have yet to claim. We receive symbols that mirror our evolution. The more we notice, the more fluent we become in the language of the world soul, the anima mundi the philosophers spoke of. Some teachings describe synchronicity as the smile of the divine. When we are lost in analysis or control, the universe feels silent. When we surrender to wonder, it smiles back. That smile may appear as a gentle joke, a number repeating, a song echoing your thoughts, a message written on a passing truck exactly when you need it. The form is trivial, but the feeling is sacred. It reminds you that you are not navigating alone. There is a rhythm to these moments, a pulse that matches the beating of the heart. In Sanskrit, the word spanda refers to the subtle vibration of consciousness that gives rise to creation. Synchronicity is a manifestation of that vibration reaching awareness. It is consciousness noticing itself through the play of form. The ancients would say that the gods dance when we pay attention, because attention completes the circle of creation. As your awareness refines, coincidences cease to be surprises and become confirmations. You begin to sense the field before it crystallizes into event. Intuition sharpens, timing becomes effortless. This is not control but communion, the difference between forcing a door open and feeling it unlock, because you finally turned the key the right way. The key is alignment, not effort. At this stage, seekers were once warned, do not mistake the signs for the source. The purpose of synchronicity is to draw you inward, not outward. Each alignment whispers, remember who is watching. The world mirrors you, because you are the mirror of the world. When you realize this fully, even the smallest moment, an echoing word, a flutter of wings, a pattern in the sand becomes a verse in the poem of your own awakening. To live in this awareness is to inhabit a sacred cosmos again. The marketplace becomes a temple. The sound of traffic becomes a chant. Every stranger becomes a messenger carrying some fragment of your own reflection. You begin to walk differently, slower, more present, because you know the stage is alive and listening. And somewhere, beneath the pulse of everyday noise, you start to hear it. The faint melody that has guided seekers since the dawn of memory. It is the song of correspondence, the whisper between worlds, the hidden code of coincidence. As the melody deepens, a realization dawns. Synchronicity is not a rare phenomenon granted to a chosen few. It is the natural language of a conscious universe, speaking constantly through form, waiting for the listener to remember how to hear. What keeps most people deaf to this dialogue is not the absence of signs, but the noise of their own disbelief. The rational mind, raised to worship proof, dismisses whispers it cannot measure. Yet truth often arrives in symbols too subtle for logic but too persistent for coincidence. When an initiate entered a mystery school, the first trial was silence. For days or weeks, the student would sit in stillness, fasting, listening, watching the patterns of breath and shadow. They were not told what to expect. The teachers knew that revelation cannot be given. It must emerge through presence. Sooner or later, as the chatter of thoughts slowed, the student would begin to perceive the code not as words or visions, but as rhythm. The world around them would start to move in synchrony with their awareness. What they felt, the environment mirrored. What they feared, appeared. What they trusted, unfolded. In that instant, the illusion of separation cracked. To experience this today requires the same surrender. Silence is still the doorway. The signs have never stopped speaking. We have simply filled the world with noise. Yet the moment you become still, reality rushes to meet you with the precision of a tide returning to its shore. Every mystic who ever touched truth described the same paradox. The deeper you listen, the more personal the signs become, and yet the less they seem about you. Synchronicity personalizes to awaken, then depersonalizes to liberate. In the beginning, the universe sends messages tailored to your story, the love you seek, the challenge you face. But as understanding matures, the pattern itself becomes the teacher. You begin to see that every symbol points beyond self, to the living intelligence that weaves all things together. In this awareness, the question shifts from "why is this happening to me?" to "what is this showing me about the whole?" The symbols cease to orbit the ego and begin to orbit the soul. The dance becomes cosmic. Think of how a constellation forms. To the untrained eye, the stars are random lights scattered across the sky. But connect them with imagination, and patterns emerge. Orion, the hunter; Lyra, the harp. The ancients projected stories onto the heavens not to decorate the night, but to map the correspondence between human experience and celestial order. Every myth was an act of alignment, a reminder that the same archetypes governing the stars live within the psyche. When you experience synchronicity, you are doing what those stargazers did. You are tracing connections across the vastness, finding meaning in the scatter, realizing the pattern was there all along. The bridge between chaos and cosmos is meaning. The moment an event acquires meaning, it becomes part of the pattern. The same event, seen through the eyes of indifference, is mere chance. Meaning is the magic that transforms randomness into revelation. This is why synchronicity cannot be proven by science. It lives in the subjective realm where meaning is born. And yet, to the one who experiences it, it feels more solid than any fact. There is an ancient teaching that the universe does not speak in nouns but in verbs. Everything is process. A tree is treeing, a river is rivering, and you are humaning a verb unfolding through time. Synchronicity happens when two or more processes momentarily rhyme, creating a verse of reality so perfect that it jolts awareness awake. These rhymes are the heartbeat of creation itself. When we notice them, we momentarily rise above the linear flow of time and glimpse the pattern that moves beneath it. The Pythagoreans called this harmony cosmos, meaning order and beauty intertwined. To live in harmony with the cosmos was to participate consciously in its rhythm. They listened for that rhythm in numbers, music, and geometry. Today, we might hear it in the choreography of our own days, the improbable meetings, the echoes of words, the timing of events that align so neatly they feel composed. Whether in ancient stone temples or in city streets lit by neon, the pattern speaks the same language, resonance. At its heart, synchronicity is an act of intimacy between you and the totality. It is reality leaning closer, whispering, "I know you." That intimacy can be both thrilling and unsettling. For if the universe responds to your thoughts, then every thought becomes sacred. You begin to sense the responsibility of consciousness, that every emotion you nurture, every belief you reinforce, sends ripples through the field. You realize that creation is not happening to you. It is happening with you, through you. This realization births reverence. The ancients would bow before a sunrise not because they worshiped the sun as separate, but because they recognized the shared pulse of energy between themselves and the star. Synchronicity invites that same bow, a gesture of awe toward the living dialogue that never ceases. There are stories from the deserts of old, in which travelers, guided by nothing but intuition, followed signs across endless dunes until they reached an oasis precisely when their strength failed. Such tales were not meant as miracles, but as metaphors for trust. The oasis appears when the seeker listens. Trust is the magnetic field that aligns the code. Doubt clouds perception. Trust clarifies it. And yet trust does not mean passivity. The signs are not meant to replace choice, but to refine it. The universe speaks, but you must answer. Each synchronicity offers a crossroads. Will you follow the thread or ignore it? In that moment, destiny and free will converge. The sign presents potential. Your response decides the outcome. Over time, this dialogue becomes your compass. The more you honor it, the more precise it grows. When you ignore it, it fades into the background until another awakening is needed. The universe is patient. It does not punish. It waits. There is a teaching hidden within the Egyptian word Heka, often translated as magic. Its deeper meaning is activated word, the vibration that bridges thought and form. Every synchronicity is a Heka, an activated word spoken by reality in response to your vibration. The language is symbolic because symbols bypass resistance. They reach the heart directly. A symbol can carry layers of meaning that no sentence could contain. For instance, imagine you keep seeing feathers. At first, it seems meaningless, but soon they appear everywhere on sidewalks, in art, in dreams. To an ancient priest, the feather symbolized Ma'at, the principle of truth and balance. Its repeated appearance might suggest a call to restore inner equilibrium. Whether or not you know that history, your psyche understands it intuitively. The feather becomes a message written in the alphabet of the soul. Through such signs, reality educates the heart. It teaches in riddles because riddles awaken participation. If the message were spelled out plainly, it would remain external knowledge. By wrapping it in symbol, the universe invites you to decode it, turning information into transformation. In deciphering the outer sign, you uncover an inner truth. At this point, the seeker learns the difference between superstition and synchronicity. Superstition assigns power to the symbol itself. Synchronicity recognizes that the power lies in the relationship. It is not the feather, the number, or the coincidence that is divine. It is the awareness meeting itself through those forms. Without awareness, the signs are inert. With awareness, the entire world becomes alive. The mystic poet Rumi wrote, "The moment you accept what troubles you've been given, the door will open." He was describing the same law. Alignment through acceptance. Resistance closes the channel. Receptivity opens it. When you stop fighting what is and begin to listen to what it's showing, life begins to coordinate with you in breathtaking ways. Synchronicity is the artistry of presence. It paints reality with the colors of your attention. When your mind is fragmented, the painting appears chaotic. When your awareness is whole, the picture reveals coherence. Thus, every coincidence becomes a brushstroke of a larger masterpiece. A masterpiece that is not finished until you see it. The first stage of this recognition is wonder. The second is stewardship. Once you understand that life communicates with you, you are called to refine your listening. Not every coincidence is guidance. Some are echoes, reflections of passing thoughts. The discerning heart learns to feel the difference, to sense which signs vibrate with truth and which simply mirror momentary noise. That discernment grows through humility and sincerity. In the final initiation of the temple schools, the adept would stand before a mirror etched with sacred geometry and be asked a single question: who reflects whom? The test was not to answer, but to realize that there is no separation between the seer and the seen. When you truly grasp that, synchronicity ceases to be something that happens to you. It becomes something that happens as you. And that is the hidden code of coincidence, not a trick of fate, but a revelation of unity. The world speaks because you are the world speaking to itself. Every echo, every repetition, every moment of perfect timing is a reminder of that unbroken wholeness. To live from this awareness is to walk in sacred partnership with existence. You no longer demand explanations. You participate in the unfolding. You no longer chase signs. You embody the signal. You become fluent in the silent grammar of the cosmos. And your life turns into a moving prayer, not for what you want, but for what you already are. So the next time the pattern appears, the same number glowing, the same word whispered, the same song arriving in the perfect instant pause, feel the breath behind it. The universe is not hinting at coincidence. It is confirming communion. The whisper says only this: you are seen. The ancients said that before the gods shaped mountains or stars, they wove meaning. They imagined the cosmos not as a mechanism, but as a manuscript, a living scroll written in symbols, where every gesture of wind or wing was a syllable in the divine tongue. To them, matter was condensed story. Every stone carried a sentence, every river a paragraph. Existence itself was the epic of awareness, learning to know itself through form. To modern eyes, the world seems built from atoms. To the sages, it was built from correspondence. As above, so below was not metaphor, but engineering. The pattern that traced constellations also sculpted the chambers of the human heart. The temple wall mirrored the curvature of the sky. The priest's chant mirrored the pulse of the stars. Meaning was the mortar that held reality together. This is the essence of the architecture of meaning. It is invisible yet structural, the lattice through which every event, every meeting, every seeming accident finds its place in the grand design. When you encounter synchronicity, a phrase in a stranger's mouth, echoing a private thought, a symbol repeating until it burns into attention, you glimpse one brick of that architecture. The universe momentarily lifts the veil, showing the symmetry behind the chaos. Imagine walking through a city you thought you knew, only to discover that every street forms part of a vast mandala when seen from above. That is how awareness expands, from the ground level of coincidence to the aerial vision of connection. Meaning is the force of gravity in this inner cosmos. It pulls scattered experiences into orbit. Without it, life fragments into unrelated incidents. With it, everything arranges itself around purpose. That is why a single realization can reorganize years of confusion the moment you understand why. The fragments fuse into coherence. The ancient builders knew this. When they raised their temples, they did not simply align stones, but harmonized them with celestial cycles. The layout of pillars mirrored star paths. The ratio of walls echoed musical intervals. They believed that if you built in the language of harmony, the gods themselves would dwell within the structure. The same is true of consciousness. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions are arranged in proportion, meaning descends like light through stained glass. In the inner temple of the psyche, belief is architecture. Every conviction forms a pillar, every doubt a crack. The geometry of thought determines what kind of light you can hold. When fear rules, the windows narrow. When wonder rules, they widen until revelation pours through. Synchronicity, then, is the universe testing the integrity of your structure, sending beams of meaning to see which chambers resonate. The more authentic the architecture, the clearer the resonance. Consider the moments when everything feels choreographed. A friend calls just as you think of them. The right book falls from a shelf. A dream predicts the conversation you will have tomorrow. These are not intrusions of magic into matter, but matter remembering its origin and meaning. They are the psyche's way of whispering, "We are still connected." In psychological language, we might say that the unconscious communicates with the conscious mind through symbolic events. But to the mythic imagination, something grander is occurring. The soul and the world are recognizing each other as reflections. Reality becomes a mirror in which psyche sees its own archetypes painted on the surface of time. Every symbol that catches your attention is an ambassador of this dialogue. When you meet one repeatedly, a raven, a number, a melody it is, as if a doorway appears in the everyday, inviting you to step into deeper participation. The symbol itself has no fixed meaning. It takes on life only through your relationship with it. Thus, interpretation is not an intellectual act, but an initiation. You do not decode the symbol. You become the kind of consciousness that understands it. The Egyptians called this process Heka creative utterance, the act by which thought becomes world. To speak a word with full awareness was to release its essence into form. Synchronicity is the echo of your own Heka returning from the vastness. You dream a symbol into being, and the world repeats it aloud so that you may recognize your power. From a mythic perspective, meaning is not found but remembered. Before birth, the soul is said to have chosen its pattern, a unique thread in the tapestry of existence. Forgetting that pattern is part of incarnation. Remembering it is the adventure we call destiny. Every coincidence is a clue in the labyrinth, leading you back to that remembrance. Psychologically, this is the movement from chaos to coherence. The conscious ego lives like a single room in a mansion it does not yet know. The unconscious, the rest of the house, communicates by flickering lights, creaking doors, rearranged objects. Synchronicities are those creaks in the architecture of awareness, signals that more rooms await exploration. When you follow them, you expand into the house of self, discovering that the mansion has no outer wall, it opens into the cosmos. The architecture of meaning is fractal. Each insight reveals the pattern at a larger scale. The number that follows you personally also appears in myths, in geometry, in nature's designs. A spiral seen on a shell repeats in galaxies, in hurricanes, in the unfolding of ferns. The message is consistent. Structure is consciousness expressing beauty through repetition. What you perceive as coincidence is the mind of the universe drawing your attention to its own signature. To live inside that realization is to enter sacred time. Ordinary time moves in straight lines. Sacred time circles like a serpent swallowing its tail. Synchronicities mark the moments when linear time bends back upon itself, allowing eternity to shine through. The past and future align around a single instant of awareness, and for a breath you stand outside causality, in pure presence. This bending of time is not supernatural, it is psychological. When awareness is fully concentrated, perception widens. The mind stops dividing before and after, seeing instead the simultaneity of patterns. That state of wholeness generates meaningful coincidence, because the observer and the observed are momentarily one. The event aligns with the thought that perceives it, because both arise from the same field. Imagine a dreamer realizing she is dreaming. Instantly, the dream responds to her intention. That is what happens in waking life when you become lucid within your own story. Synchronicity is the dream acknowledging the dreamer. The Greeks personified this dynamic as the goddess Tyche, the spirit of chance. To the profane, she was random fortune, but to the initiate, she was divine orchestration disguised as unpredictability. Temples were built to her at crossroads, for that is where choice meets destiny. Each coincidence you encounter is such a crossroads. an invitation to participate consciously in the unfolding design. The architecture, however, does not guarantee comfort, meaning often rearranges our structures through disruption. When the old pattern no longer serves growth, the lattice shakes. Events that seem like breakdowns are often breakthroughs disguised as chaos, the demolition necessary for a new blueprint. Just as ancient builders sometimes dismantled entire temples to realign them with the stars, life dismantles circumstances to realign you with truth. In those times, synchronicities can appear with unnerving intensity, symbols repeating like drumbeats, dreams shouting in color, strangers delivering uncanny messages. It feels as if the universe itself is impatient. Yet that pressure is love in disguise, the architecture insisting that you inhabit the room prepared for your next expansion. Here psychology meets myth. Jung called these upheavals individuation, the psyche's drive toward wholeness. Myths call them initiations, the soul's passage through death and rebirth. Both describe the same blueprint of transformation. The coinciding events are the signposts ensuring the traveler does not lose the path. When you surrender to this process, meaning reveals itself not as something added to life, but as life's very substance. You begin to sense that the world is built from language and unspoken grammar of vibration translating spirit into matter. The poet does not invent metaphor. She overhears creation thinking aloud. Ultimately, the architecture of meaning is what allows the infinite to experience itself in finite form. Every coincidence, every pattern, every resonance is a joint in that structure, flexing as awareness moves through it. When you recognize this, you cease to chase signs and begin to build with them. You become an architect of your own temple of understanding, laying each moment like a stone carved with gratitude. The ancients said the world was spoken into being. Modern mystics say it is perceived into being. Both are correct, for perception is a form of speech. Each time you name something sacred, you strengthen the foundation of the invisible cathedral. Each time you reduce it to chance, a brick loosens. Meaning is maintained through reverence. So the next time a coincidence stirs your intuition, pause before labeling it random. Listen for the tone beneath the event. Feel whether it resonates with truth or fear, expansion or contraction. In that subtle vibration lies the blueprint of your next step. Follow it as an architect follows the line of symmetry, trusting that the design knows more than the builder. And perhaps, as you walk through an ordinary day, you will begin to sense the quiet majesty beneath its surfaces, the way traffic lights pulse like sacred sigils, conversations align like ritual responses, and even the breath between words seems timed to an unseen rhythm. Then you will know you are inside the temple again, not as visitor but as living column, supporting and supported by the architecture of meaning itself. Once the seeker begins to glimpse the structure of meaning, life itself changes texture. The solid surfaces of reality become translucent, and you can sense an intelligence moving behind the veil of appearances. Every object, every encounter, every breath carries a subtle pulse, as if the universe were thinking through you. This is the stage when perception becomes participation. You are no longer looking at the pattern. You are living inside it. In ancient symbolism, this shift was called the second birth. The first birth brings you into the physical world. The second awakens you into the world of symbols. After that awakening, nothing is truly mundane. A conversation overheard in a cafe may contain an oracle. The flight of birds can mirror the movement of your own thoughts. The same wind that stirs the leaves seems to move through your chest. Meaning is no longer something you interpret, it is something that interprets you. But this intimacy with pattern also brings responsibility. When every gesture is connected to the whole, you begin to see that consciousness is creative in ways both subtle and vast. A single attitude, a single belief, can ripple through the field and alter what unfolds. This is why the old mystics warned their initiates to guard the heart. To think is to build. To feel is to carve. To act is to set stone upon stone in the invisible architecture. Psychologically, this realization marks the transition from projection to authorship. You stop seeing the world as a stage on which your unexamined stories play themselves out, and begin to recognize that you are co-author of the script. Every coincidence, every repetition of theme, is an invitation to revise the story into alignment with truth. The outer pattern changes only when the inner narrative changes. It is here that meaning becomes alchemical. In the alchemist's laboratory, base metal was never the real subject. The true transformation was the refinement of perception. Lead became gold when awareness could perceive the divine within the ordinary. Synchronicity performs the same transmutation in daily life. It takes the dull metal of circumstance and reveals the hidden gold of connection. The Hermetic texts describe a moment when the student, overwhelmed by signs, cries out to the teacher, "How can I bear so much revelation?" The teacher replies, "Let the pattern pass through you, not cling to you." The temple is built from transparency, not from grasping. Meaning is fluid. When you try to hold it too tightly, it freezes into superstition. To live in harmony with the architecture is to let significance move freely, forming and dissolving like breath. At this point, paradox becomes your companion. The more clearly you perceive the design, the more you realize that it is infinite and unfinished. Each understanding births another mystery. Every answer multiplies into new questions. The pattern is alive precisely because it can never be completed. The architecture of meaning is an organism, growing through your attention, evolving as you evolve. The ancients illustrated this with the symbol of the labyrinth. To the uninitiated, a labyrinth looks like a trap, but to the wise, it is a map of return. Each turn that seems to lead away from the center is actually guiding you toward it through a higher logic. Synchronicities are those turns, the unexpected bends that redirect your path. You may resist them, believing you have lost your way, only to discover that they were the precise movements required to reach the heart. Psychologically, these turns represent the moments when unconscious material surfaces in the form of external events. A recurring obstacle, a repeated loss, a familiar conflict appearing in new disguise, all are the psyche's way of revealing what has not yet been integrated. The pattern outside reflects the pattern inside, patiently repeating until awareness dawns. When the lesson is embodied, the labyrinth straightens into a clear road. There is a secret that every contemplative eventually learns. Meaning is not merely discovered. It is courted. It appears to those who love it. When you treat existence as sacred text, existence responds like one. Symbols bloom under the gaze of reverence. Skepticism closes the petals, but curiosity opens them. This is why wonder is not childish, it is architect's light. It illuminates the blueprint so that consciousness can see what it is creating. Ancient myth places this principle in the figure of Hermes, the messenger who moves between worlds. Hermes governs coincidences, crossroads, and communication, the flow of meaning. He is playful, unpredictable, but never malicious. His messages arrive in puns, jokes, double meanings, and serendipities that make you laugh even as they humble you. Psychologically, Hermes is that aspect of mind that connects intellect and intuition. When he moves freely, insight becomes effortless. When blocked by cynicism or rigidity, the dialogue with life becomes distorted. To walk with Hermes is to cultivate a sense of humor about the divine. The cosmos, after all, is a storyteller with an infinite appetite for paradox. Meaning reveals itself most clearly to the one who can smile at mystery. Laughter, like prayer, expands awareness. It breaks the crust of certainty and lets light in. In the modern world, where information floods every channel, it is easy to confuse data with meaning. But they are opposites. Information multiplies distinctions, meaning unifies them. Information fills the mind. Meaning opens the heart. The architecture of meaning is therefore an antidote to the tyranny of noise. It teaches that wisdom is not the accumulation of facts, but the art of seeing connection. When you live from that art, choices begin to flow differently. Decisions are no longer made by calculation, but by resonance. You feel which path vibrates with coherence, which conversation hums with truth. This is not irrational. It is transrational. a higher order of logic that includes intuition. The ancients called it the eye of the heart. When that eye is open, guidance is immediate. Such living demands trust, and trust is built through practice. Each time you follow a subtle sign and witness the harmony that results, confidence deepens. The architecture proves itself through experience, not theory. Gradually, the distance between impulse and manifestation shortens. Thought and event begin to coincide with uncanny speed. The dream and the world synchronize. At this stage, some seekers grow uneasy. Am I imagining all of this? They ask. The answer is both yes and no. Yes, in the sense that imagination is the medium through which meaning speaks. No, because imagination is not fantasy. It is the creative interface of consciousness and form. What you imagine with sincerity becomes the seed of reality. The pattern honors authenticity. The danger is inflation. The ego mistaking its role in the process. The architecture of meaning is co-creative, not dictatorial. You are a participant, not the sole designer. When humility balances imagination, synchronicity becomes service. Your alignment benefits the larger field. When pride intrudes, the pattern fractures into confusion. The builder forgets the blueprint. Thus, humility is structural integrity. From the psychological view, this balance marks the maturity of individuation. The self recognizes itself as both part and whole, unique yet inseparable from the collective psyche. The mythic echo of this moment is the completion of the temple, the point when the architect steps back and realizes that the building itself is alive, breathing with the same spirit that conceived it. Then, a remarkable quiet descends. The search for meaning turns inward, and the seeker discovers that meaning is the natural fragrance of awareness. You do not need to find it, you need only stop resisting it. The architecture was never outside, it was the geometry of perception itself. In that silence, coincidence ceases to surprise. It becomes the rhythm of ordinary grace, the song of a living universe in perfect correspondence with itself. The difference between miracle and routine dissolves. Washing a cup, walking through a doorway, hearing a child laugh, each act reveals the same pattern of participation. The temple is complete, and you are both its builder and its light. Yet even this is not an ending. For the architecture of meaning is recursive. Every realization becomes a new foundation. Every foundation invites a higher structure. Awareness ascends like a spiral staircase whose top is never reached. Each turn expands perspective, offering wider vistas of connection. And so the story continues not as linear progression but as eternal return, a dance of understanding deepening through time. When you next encounter a coincidence, remember this. It is not the universe sending a message to a separate you. It is the totality recognizing itself in miniature. Meaning is the moment the infinite catches its own reflection and smiles. From that smile, the path to the final revelation unfolds, a revelation that Section 3 will explore. How the awakened mind moves from seeing the pattern to becoming the pattern, from reading the sacred text to speaking it into being. When the seeker finally stops asking why the signs appear and begins asking who is looking through them, the horizon changes. The air itself feels intelligent. Meaning no longer flashes as occasional sparks. It moves like weather. Synchronicity ceases to be a message delivered from outside. It becomes the pulse of your own awareness echoing through form. The ancients called this stage the second birth. It was the moment the initiate ceased being a reader of omens and became the omen itself. They said a person who reaches this threshold no longer follows destiny. Destiny follows them, drawn by the magnetic coherence of a consciousness aligned with its own source. Imagine standing on the shore where waves once seemed separate, each arrival an event. Then, one evening, the rhythm clicks, the whole ocean is breathing through you. Every choice, every meeting, every silence participates in one breath. This is what it means to become the pattern. At first, it feels like dissolving. The mind, accustomed to dividing experience into cause and effect, loses its footing. Ordinary time softens. You might notice sequences repeating not for reassurance, but for calibration, like the universe, fine-tuning your instrument. 1111 becomes less a sign and more a metronome, syncing inner thought with outer motion. You are learning to keep time with creation itself. This dissolution frightens the personality because it thrives on separation. It asks, if everything is one movement, what becomes of me? The answer comes quietly. You were never the dancer. You were the dance pretending to be small enough to watch itself. To live from that knowing requires a new form of attention, one that feels like listening with your entire body. Every gesture becomes dialogue. Pouring tea. You sense the patience of water cooling, the humility of clay holding, the warmth that passes like breath between cup and hand. These are no longer poetic metaphors. They are direct perceptions of participation. The smallest act carries cosmic symmetry. The priests of Thebes trained novices by assigning mundane tasks, sweeping floors, arranging stones, tending lamps. Each motion was performed as invocation, a rehearsal of cosmic order. They believed that harmony in the smallest movement invited harmony in the stars. The modern mind, rushing toward grand purpose, forgets this secret. The infinite hides easiest in the ordinary. As awareness refines, intuition replaces analysis. Intuition is not emotion or impulse. It is pattern recognition operating faster than language. It feels like remembering something you never learned. Through it, the universe conducts you the way a river conducts a leaf, not by force, but by current. Psychologically, this stage marks the integration of opposites. The conscious and unconscious, once adversaries, begin exchanging gifts. Dreams leak into daylight. Decisions form before logic intervenes. You are no longer manufacturing outcomes. You are collaborating with an intelligence that includes you. The ego's role changes from commander to custodian. Its task is to keep the channel clear, to protect coherence. Many traditions symbolize this shift with images of marriage. In alchemy, it was the conjunctio, the wedding of sun and moon. In Tantra, the union of Shiva and Shakti. In Hermeticism, the joining of the winged and the rooted. All spoke of the same transformation, the reconciliation of doing and being, thought and feeling, heaven and earth inside one heart. When that union stabilizes, synchronicity becomes continuous, a living feedback loop between soul and world. But every initiation tests the depth of surrender. There comes a night when the signs go silent. The numbers vanish, coincidences cease, intuition feels numb. It is not punishment, it is integration. The pattern hides to see if you have learned to trust it when unseen. The ancients called this the desert between temples. Walk it without craving confirmation, and the rhythm will return stronger, subtler, woven through every atom. In psychological terms, this is the shift from external validation to intrinsic meaning. The unconscious no longer needs to project significance onto random events because meaning has been reclaimed as a constant quality of awareness itself. You realize that everything radiates symbolism simply by existing. A falling leaf, a flickering streetlight, a stranger's laughter all carry the same divine equation. Consciousness encountering itself. The more you embody this, the more reality mirrors coherence. Relationships harmonize or dissolve with startling precision. Opportunities appear in uncanny sequence. Even obstacles reveal choreography, each resistance placed exactly where it forces latent strength to awaken. You start to see that life doesn't happen to you, or even for you. It happens through you, as you. Ancient mystics describe this as moving from the path of seeking to the path of emanation. The seeker collects light. The emanator radiates it. When you reach this vibration, guidance arrives before the question forms. The field anticipates need. What once felt miraculous becomes functional. In this state, synchronicity transforms from spectacle to responsibility. Every thought now carries weight because every thought participates in the architecture. The universe takes your inner weather as instruction. Harbor resentment, and you'll notice discord in your environment. Cultivate gratitude, and harmony multiplies. Not because of moral reward, but because the pattern obeys resonance. The cosmos speaks frequency, not language. The challenge is subtle. How to remain human while remembering divinity. To see through the illusion without withdrawing from its beauty. The solution, every tradition insists, is devotion not to a deity outside, but to the pulse of awareness itself. When you love the pattern, you protect it. When you protect it, it reveals more. Devotion expresses as presence. Presence requires slowing. In stillness, the nervous system learns to mirror cosmic rhythm instead of digital rhythm. Breathing becomes prayer, movement becomes mantra. Over time, this synchronization rewires perception. The ordinary world, once opaque, turns translucent, light streaming through matter like breath through glass. Eventually, the old self feels like a dream that dreamed you, yet the dreamer remains tender toward its creations. Compassion blossoms naturally because everything you meet is recognized as another expression of the same source trying to remember itself. Synchronicity now functions as empathy, in motion the universe adjusting its form to comfort, teach, or celebrate its own awareness. In myth, this was the moment the initiate received the eye of illumination, not a literal organ but a symbol of panoramic vision, the ability to see the unity behind multiplicity. With that eye open, the initiate could walk through chaos and perceive pattern, through noise and hear music. Nothing was random, nothing wasted. From a psychological lens, this is individuation, fulfilled the conscious ego aligned with the self, the small mind orbiting in harmony with the vast psyche. You begin to feel less like a person having experiences, and more like experience expressing itself as a person. That recognition births unshakable peace. Yet awakening is never static. The pattern is alive, and life keeps inviting deeper participation. Each insight dissolves into wider mystery. The universe, now aware that you can hear it, speaks in increasingly complex harmonies, sometimes through silence, sometimes through paradox. You learn to answer with the same language: action without attachment, vision without control, love without possession. In this way, the mythic and the psychological finally converge. The gods are no longer figures on temple walls. They are functions of consciousness within you, archetypes activated by awareness. Hermes becomes your intuition, Isis, your capacity to regenerate, Thoth, your inner order. To become the pattern is to host the pantheon within. The outer world will still shift and surprise, but the axis of meaning remains steady. You no longer chase synchronicity. It flows through your fingertips like current through copper. You have become the instrument through which the cosmos plays itself awake. And somewhere in that music, a new question begins to hum, a question that will carry us into the final movement of this journey. If reality mirrors consciousness so precisely, what might happen when consciousness mirrors love itself? When awareness begins to breathe through everything, a strange calm descends. Events still rise and fall, but they do so inside a greater stillness. You feel the pulse of life move through you the way blood moves through a sleeping hand, quiet, inevitable, intimate. The pattern that once dazzled with symbols now becomes transparent light. Its purpose was never to impress. It was to awaken participation. At first, participation expresses as attunement moving with the rhythm of what is. Later, it matures into embodiment. You no longer translate the message of the universe, you become its tone. Words, gestures, silences carry a coherence that others can feel even when they do not understand. Presence itself becomes transmission. In the old temples, this was called the shining. Initiates who reached it were said to walk without shadow, not because they emitted physical light, but because they no longer opposed the light of the world. Psychologically, it describes the person whose inner conflicts have been reconciled. Nothing within them resists wholeness. They do not seek control and therefore influence effortlessly. To live as the pattern is to serve as mirror. Each interaction reflects a possibility of harmony. Your listening becomes architecture, your kindness, geometry. You begin to realize that love is not an emotion, but the fundamental design principle of existence. The golden ratio that holds galaxies and hearts alike. When love replaces fear as the organizing frequency, synchronicity changes flavor. The coincidences no longer arrive as shocks of surprise. They appear as quiet alignments, self-evident as breathing. The world no longer needs to shout because you are listening all the time. Guidance turns subtle, almost playful. The right words at the right moment, a door opening just as another closes, a sudden knowing that saves months of effort. In psychological language, this is the birth of creative maturity. Desire and will have merged into intention. Intention and action have merged into expression. Life ceases to feel like a series of problems to solve and becomes a field of relationships to honor. The ego does not disappear. It takes its rightful seat as steward of attention, ensuring that spirit can work through matter without distortion. Every spiritual tradition, when stripped of costume, teaches the same transition from vision to embodiment. The Buddha touched the earth. Christ broke bread. Hermes returned to the marketplace. The sage who is seen through illusion does not flee it. They pour their realization back into it. They become artisans of reality, shaping daily life as temple service. To maintain that embodiment requires rhythm. The pattern lives through cadence, inhale and exhale, solitude and communion, receiving and giving. When you honor these oscillations, energy replenishes itself. Disregard them, and dissonance creeps in. This is why the ancients synchronized prayer with sunrise and sunset, planting with the moon, music with heartbeat. They understood that alignment is sustained through repetition. Modern life, dominated by velocity, tempts you to forget rhythm. But the pattern is patient. It will remind you through fatigue, through longing, through coincidences that slow you down. Each delay, each detour, is mercy disguised as inconvenience. The universe refuses to move faster than love. At some point, a deeper humility dawns. Even awareness is not yours. The consciousness through which you experience life is the same consciousness through which the stars burn. You are not merely connected, you are continuity itself. The pattern never needed to be found. It needed to recognize itself through your eyes. In myth, this realization was depicted as the return of the hero with the elixir. The journey outward through chaos ends where it began, but the traveler has changed. What was once seen as fate is now understood as participation. What was once random now reveals design. The ordinary world becomes holy ground. To live from that recognition is a gentle art. You still plan, work, love, and grieve. But every action carries the fragrance of awareness. When anger arises, you see its geometry and respond with proportion. When joy erupts, you let it sing without clinging. Life remains dynamic, yet the center stays still. The temple is built not of stone but of attention. Psychologically, this final integration dissolves the split between sacred and secular. The unconscious no longer needs to dramatize forgotten truths as outer coincidences, because every moment is acknowledged as meaningful. The dream and the waking world have merged. You are dreaming consciously, sculpting reality with each breath. This embodiment naturally radiates service, not duty, but overflow. The pattern gives itself away through you. A word spoken from coherence can heal. A presence anchored in stillness can retune a room. You begin to see that enlightenment was never personal achievement. It was evolution's way of keeping creation alive. Yet even this radiance carries responsibility. The more transparent you become, the more precisely the universe answers you. Every intention echoes faster. Every distortion returns for correction. Integrity becomes navigation. To remain in harmony, you must keep polishing perception. Keep choosing love over fear, truth over convenience. This is the lifelong discipline of the conscious creator. And so the spiral continues. Awareness deepens into compassion. Compassion unfolds into creativity. Creativity circles back into awareness. There is no final attainment, only the dance. The pattern delights in endless revelation. To become it is to celebrate its motion. If you ever forget, remember the simplest practice. Breathe, look, and listen. Each inhale unites you with the unseen architect. Each exhale blesses the visible world. Notice the ordinary miracle. Sunlight on a wall, the rhythm of footsteps, the way coincidence still flirts at the edges of your attention. These are the universe's small reminders that it has never stopped conversing with you. When you honor them, reality answers. The conversation becomes symphonic, meaning sings through matter, and you realize that heaven was not elsewhere, it was the transparency of perception all along. Now close the book of explanation and open the book of experience. For one day, treat every encounter as deliberate, every silence as dialogue, every event as message. Move as if the cosmos were watching itself through your eyes. Speak as if each word tuned the world. Do this, and you will not need further proof of synchronicity. You will be the proof living geometry, walking prayer, the pattern made flesh.